Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Welcome, I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. This is another in the series of videos titled Family Business Makes No Sense, and today we're talking about a very common cause of conflict in family business called the CEO syndrome or the leadership identity trap. This is something which impacts a lot of families who go into business where the natural tendency is you have competing pressures between individuals, families and businesses which result in some sort of conflict. If we have a better understanding of those causes and we know what to do about it based on experiences of many other families, then there's a reasonable chance the family and the business will survive and maybe even thrive for a next generation. If not, we have problems. CEO syndrome is something that is deeply identity-based, and therefore it has a major impact on a key decision maker in both the family and the business. So let's dive in and have a talk. The first thing we should note is that CEO syndrome is not something that you're going to find in a book of psychological syndromes, although it is a psychological condition. It is something which is identifiable very, very much within the family business space. And it's a thing that you will find family business advisors talking about and family businesses themselves. The CEO syndrome occurs when a family business leader identifies their entire self-worth too much with their role as leader of the family and the business, to the extent that they are figuratively, if not actually, in their minds saying, the business is my life, therefore not leading the business must be my death. And there have been a lot of studies of CEO mortality over the years, senior executive mortality over the years, that have focused on the fact that when somebody who is in a high status, high prestige, high stress role steps down, and particularly if they're forced to step down when they are not fully emotionally prepared to do so, their average life expectancy is less than 24 months. Even though they may have been very healthy when this actually took place. And the interpretation drawn is that the loss of status, loss of prestige, loss of motivation, loss of life purpose takes such an attack on their sense of self and identity that for some reason that nobody can yet explain, they contract some horrendous terminal disease and die. And that is so well documented and so well established, it actually is beyond conversation anymore. And you'll find a great many CEOs of the appropriate age have got mates who stepped down, and intellectually they were ready. They wanted to work on the golf handicap, go travelling with their partner and spend more time with the grandkids and smell the roses, play with the boat, go fishing, whatever. But they found that only kept them going for a while, and then somewhere between 9 and 12 months it began a bit boring. The holiday was over, and they actually wanted to get back into a life of purpose. But of course the whole world had moved on, and there was no longer a place for them. And if they inserted themselves, it was resented. That didn't work well. And if they didn't, they found themselves slipping into depression, and then illness, and then death. And of course nobody wants that to happen. So part of what we're going to talk about here is how do you prevent getting to that place. But first of all, we need to understand CEO syndrome is often difficult to deal with, not only because the key decision maker is the key decision maker, so they can block change by blocking decisions and the implementation of decisions, but also because it is a deeply personal thing rooted in sense of identity And unless you've got very high emotional skills and very good empathy, it's very hard to project yourself into the shoes of said CEO and understand exactly what they're going through. Now, people who've got a million outside interests don't tend to have so much of a CEO syndrome because a lot of their identity is tied in with the variety of things that they do in various other places. But if somebody is very focused on their CEO role, the chances are that the reason why the syndrome has developed is because although they are strong individuals in their leadership tasks, robed in the cloth of office, if you like, underneath they are insecure about what life is for them outside of that particular role. Now that means you're dealing with an insecure person, not a confident person as they normally appear to be. And of course the strategy for dealing with an insecure person has got to be fundamentally different to what you would do if you had somebody who was very, very confident. So we need to be gentle most of the time. We need to uncover and understand why is it that somebody has associated themselves so completely, and what can we do to help them change their narrative, see themselves as still having a valuable role if necessary, as a brand ambassador or founder of the business or head of special projects, chair of the board, something of that sort. Anything that gets them out of an operational role where new ideas, new systems, new processes, new people need to be introduced, which challenges their sense of self and their control because they had the system all worked out as CEO. So we're helping them to change the narrative so they can change without breaking them in the process. If somebody is suffering from CEO syndrome, the consequence is they block succession processes. They may have promised for decades, when I hit 65, 70, 72, 75, whatever it is, the business becomes yours, my son, my daughter, my children, my employees, whoever it may happen to be. But when they get there, they can't do it because they've got nowhere else to go personally. So they double down holding tight and they break a whole bunch of promises, which breaks a whole load of trust, which reduces respect and ultimately generates conflict in the workplace and between family members. That is not a pretty look, and we don't want that to be there. But even that may be less damaging than the CEO who hands over the reins and the responsibility and the accountability, but not the real authority. So they've handed over the reins, they don't get off the horse. They're second guessing, they're looking over the new CEO's shoulders, they're just waiting for an opportunity to leap back in and demonstrate that they really are the saviours of the business and the people that the business needs to be in the driving seat. Now this creates problems back at home for the successor. Let's say it's the owner's son or daughter whose spouse has been told for the last 20, 30, 40 years, we are building this business so that when we take it over, it will support our family first, maybe the broader family second. And in return for that love and devotion and hard work, they have been underpaid. There's been a whole heap of sweat equity has gone into being in that role. So their family unit has suffered because they haven't been earning at the level they perhaps could have earned at in some other job for some other people. And it was all the deferred gratification thing, which has now been just blown out of the waters by the CEO's denial of willingness to move on. And the excuses the CEO brings up are legion. They may be anything from, you're not yet ready, my son or my daughter, because they cannot see in them an exact clone of themselves, so they persuade themselves that they are the business, they are the saviours, and because their son or daughter has different ideas because they're 30 years younger, they are not ready, which is a very frustrating and often very inaccurate conclusion. They may also decide to introduce some criteria to say, look, I'm ready to go as soon as we have achieved X, Y, or Z. And it may be complete an acquisition, it may be develop some new markets or some new products or some new clients or something of that sort. So the leader keeps creating false criteria to justify them delaying the handing over of the baton to the next generation. The consequence of all this is that next generation, the entire, not just the successor, but all people in the next generation are being held back, and they are frustrated if they feel it's their time to be taking responsibility and driving the whole thing forward. Even more so if they feel the business is fossilizing under the older CEO because they're not making changes necessary to remain competitive, productive and profitable. They're putting everybody's future at stake. Now that then has an impact on employees because the good employees, the best ones who have other options, will look at where's this all going? I think I'm going to leave this sinking ship before it takes me down because I have my own family and my own career to worry about, and they leave and often go to competitors. That leaves the business owner, the CEO who's holding in there, with the second and third raters who are looking for direction rather than generating new initiatives. The CEO gets frustrated because the initiatives are being repressed, not realising it's because in the process of tightening their control, they are now micromanaging people more than ever. And they get disengagement at a time when the business needs maximum engagement, but they've lost the people motivated and willing and able to make that happen. So it creates a perfect storm of trouble. You have a leader who is now moved past their use-by date. You have got disgruntled successors who may end up in the worst situations deciding to bail out, and I've certainly seen more than a few, set up in competition as a way of getting back for the broken promises. And that's a most awful situation of family collapse that comes with it. And you've lost a lot of key employees. So how do we help families in business to avoid the development of a CEO syndrome that becomes so overwhelmingly strong that it's going to lead potentially to the early demise of somebody who maybe was, a much-loved CEO, and block up a succession process potentially to the detriment of the family and the family business? There's a number of things we can do. The first is to recognise that succession is not an if, it's a when. Nobody's yet worked out how to stop getting older and getting to the point where they have reached the pinnacle of their ability to contribute effective leadership, and they should be moving into the role of mentor, supporter, storyteller, or simply go off and smell the roses and leave the field to a next generation to try new ideas and make things work for themselves, taking on the family's legacy. Now we do that by implementing family business best practice. We need a plan. If the transition of a CEO out of a leadership role has been built into a plan for decades, it's hardly going to come as a surprise or as something that somebody has not been able to look forward to and plan for and prepare for, as opposed to if there is no plan and we get to a birthday and everyone says, well, hey, you promised us 15 years ago that on this birthday you're going to step down, and nobody's really thought about it very actively or, more importantly, done anything about it in the meantime. So family business best practice says you need a strategy, you need a long-range plan and succession, transitioning of leadership and ownership needs to be embedded inside that long-range strategic plan for the business and for the family. You need structures to carry out plans. Structures such as boards, executive management teams, family councils, family offices and the like, they are given power to implement the plan, which means they also have the ability to supervise and oversee progress and make corrections where they're required. Whereas if you don't have anything of that sort, everything becomes a personal decision. And if you've got a key decision maker, they've got a pretty fundamental conflict of interest, and that can cause a lot of problems if it goes against their personal interests to do what everybody else actually wants them to do when they need to do it. We then need some systems. So we've got strategies, structures, now systems. These are processes, procedures, agreed policies and the like, and they will build in things like HR policies for compulsory retirement ages, for suitability for roles, detailed job description, things of that sort. But most importantly, the policies that encapsulate, for the sake of continuity of our business and our family, this is what we need to do to constantly renew our family business. And then we need to teach people the skills to be able to do things like have a proper perspective on who and what they are, and not tie their sense of identity so fully into the business that they fear that not being in the business is their death. A non-family advisor or advisory board can play a really critical role here. If you have a person or persons on such a board and their job is to look after the overall health of the family and the business, then part of their role is to act as a sounding board and mentor to the business leader and help them to get comfortable with the idea that there is a life after the leadership of the business, and it's actually a life they would prefer to lead at that point in their lives than the one they have been leading for the last 10, 20, 30, 40 odd years as the CEO of the business. It's time to lay aside part of that burden and take on some other burdens and challenges which better suit where they are now. And that may be utilising their knowledge and their wisdom as elders, mentors, statesmen, brand ambassadors, special project leaders and the like. They can still be useful, they can still be very meaningful, they can still provide valuable contribution. It's just not in a role to which all paths channel in the family and in the business, being the CEO, the person with whom the buck stops because they're responsible for everything. So we're changing their sense of self-image and their sense of purpose and so on, and creating new roles for them. That requires some facilitated, courageous conversations. That requires a recognition of the contribution they've done. Frequently, a leader cannot step down, same as a parent feels incomplete, until their children or their employees say to them, "You have done a great job. We are grateful for what you've done. We celebrate your achievements. We are grateful for the legacy you've created. And it is now time for you to move into a space where you can enjoy your success and you can help other people to stand on your shoulders, not just fill your shoes." That's got to come on the back, of course, of fairly comprehensive next generation preparation, but that's expected anyway as part of family business. And finally, it's useful to be able to tell stories to the family, and particularly to the individual, about others that have been through the same emotional turmoil they're feeling, about, "I know I'm a good leader, I've managed this business has been my life, I have given it my best years, I have made it what it is, I have created a legacy, why shouldn't I stay here until it suits me to leave?" We need to change that narrative, and using examples of others and maybe even introducing that person to other people who've taken that journey some time before them can be really useful. Remove the freak factor, remove any sense that they can feel like they are surrendering or failing in any way by passing on leadership of the business to the next generation, who one would hope is a successor that they have been preparing and promising leadership for many, many years. So I hope from all of this it's clear that CEO syndrome is something which is common. It's very understandable. If we approach it with empathy rather than resentment, we can help to find constructive solutions that will work for the individual, that won't damage family relations and will not damage the business either. In fact, you will improve all of those by showing gratitude, by having a clear transition. It reassures everybody, and we have continuity in the family and in the business. Now, if this has been helpful to you, please give us a like. Please share this with others who may be going through CEO syndrome related conflict in their family business. And please come back next week for the next episode of Family Business Makes No Sense. From me, Jon Kenfield in Melbourne, thanks for watching.